In this solid edge ST5 example of simulation, we're going to take a quick look at total load. We've added a new option when placing a force, torque, or bearing load, as well as heat flux and heat generation. Now, just to kind of recap, what we did is, while you're applying, in this case, a force, you'll notice that we have a new option here called total load, and it's turned on by default. So when I apply a total load to, in this case, two faces, it distributes this 2,000 millinewtons between those two faces, depending on how big they are. So in this case, on the right side, this face is a little bit larger than this one on the left. More force is going to be applied on the right side. And when we go and take a look at the results of that, you can see that in this tuning fork that it's a little bit more pressure pushes this down on the right side. Now if we go back to that, and let's say we make a change, and so in this case I'm going to drop this back down about 10 millimeters, I believe, to make it the same size as that on the opposite side. And then what I can do is I can resolve, and it'll load this, and it's going to mesh, solve, and then process the results. So now it's in the solve. And what we should see is an equal amount of force on each side, as we see here. So total load makes things a little bit more clear when you're applying these types of loads. Now, if you, at any time, if you, for example, you can turn total load off, and it's going to apply whatever value to each face, so it would actually double the value, and that's what it did in ST4. Now, another thing that I think is important to point out is that when you apply a total load, it tells you that it is a total. So if I change this and unselect that, then it's going to change and say, well, okay, now that value is per entry. So the Study Navigator is also going to give you feedback as to what type of load that is. I'm going to close this file and open up another example of total load. In this case, it's just a simple box, but we're going to apply a heat flux to each side of it. I've already got convection set up on all the faces, and then I'm going to pick, for example, heat flux, and you'll notice total load is automatically turned on. So if I pick the left face, and it's set at 100 watts of power, total load, 100 watts, that's total. That means it's applying 50 watts per side. So if I solve this, it processes the results, and if I go to floating, you'll see that it goes from 44,962 to 45,083. So I'm going to close, and I'm going to go back to that heat flux load, and this time, well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete that heat flux load, reapply, and this time I want to unselect so that we go back to what we had in ST4. So in this case, if I apply 50, and then I do again and turn that off and apply 50, and then we resolve. Now again, if we go back to floating, where we can see the decimal, 44.962 and 45.083. So that kind of shows you that they are the same, but it does explain to you whether it's total load and if it's distributed. In this case, because it's heat, they call it distributed. If you were to change that to total load, then it would say total. So it kind of gives you some good feedback. So we just wanted to make sure you understood that we've changed the way we apply loads and also heat flux and heat generation, where we use this new total load option, and it gives you good feedback as to what option you're using when you're using these loads.